For instance, patient experience teams that we work with, they do a lot of training on improving the patient experience, service quality, those kind of things. But they use campaigns very effectively. And so they might have semi-annual training, but every month they have a monthly campaign that keeps that learning alive in the hearts and minds of the workforce. So they have this very specific cadence, and they even brand the method and maybe even name that method.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Culture Change RX. This is Sue Tetzloff, co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions and the host of Culture Change RX. And today is one of those solo episodes that we call Culture Bytes. So it'll just be me here in the studio today in a little bit shorter episode than when we have guest interviews on the show. So today's topic of this Culture Bite is improving communication. In our world of Capstone Leadership Solutions and the work that we do, partnered with dozens of healthcare organizations all across the country to elevate their employee and patient experience and then leverage that for growth and financial improvements in their organization year after year, well into the future. One of the components of our work with them is to help their entire leadership team to define a leadership model and then train up and mentor and coach and onboard leaders continuously to that model so that they gain competency, consistency, and comfort and confidence in these leadership practices over time. One of those 9 core leadership practices is in the realm of improving communication. So that's a core leadership commitment, is to improve communication. And also when we're working with organizations to improve communication beyond the work that we help leaders do in this area through developing a communication plan and implementing that communication plan and evaluating and improving that communication plan over time at both an organization level and a local department-specific level, is that we also utilize an employee-driven team model in the improvement and transformation of healthcare organizations. So there actually is as well an employee-populated team where it's mainly employees representative of the entire organization, commonly led by one leader who really acts as more of a facilitator for this employee-driven team than actually the one that comes up with the ideas and makes all the decisions and does all the work. They really are just facilitating employees on the team to do that. And there's some very specific things that when we're working with either the leaders to develop and implement and refine and optimize their communication plans, or we're working with this employee-driven team to lead employee efforts to improve communication and training in the organization, because that's a dual purpose team, training and communication, so that it's by employees for employees, is that there's this nomenclature that it's good to have clarity around as they apply these approaches to being able to improve communication in their organization. So there's 4 main terms that we want them to really get clarity around as they're working as either leaders individually or collectively and or this employee-driven team with the purpose of improving training and communication. And these 4 terms that we need clarity around are communication, training, campaigning, and meetings. So sometimes we use these terms interchangeably or think they mean one thing and they actually mean something else. And when our team is to improve communication, clarity around these terms can help us to develop the plan, implement the plan, and get the best results from the plan. So we offer up to leaders and these teams the definition of communication, that it is the imparting or exchange of information or news. So this is really about keeping people up to date and in the know, so it can help everyone do their jobs better and easier and put a stop to rumors and reduce stress related to misinformation. So communication is really about keeping people informed. And then let's think about the word training. And so if we have a team that's working on both communication and training, we want them to be able to differentiate between what is the difference between communication, keeping people in the know and informed and up to date, and training. And so how training is different, yet we're using our words, right? Whether it's written, whether it's verbal or otherwise, we're still using our words, which is a form of communication when we're providing training. But the type of content we're delivering when we're training is content that's designed and delivered to be acted upon. So we learn it, we hear it, we practice it, and then we put it into use. We put it into practice. So this is content that equips and inspires a positive change in how we do things. So communication isn't driven by that purpose, right? It's to keep people up to date and in the know. Where training is to help them learn to do something in a new, better way. So when a leader or an employee-driven team is working on their communication plan and the tactics that they use to implement that communication plan, they have to understand the meaning of communication versus when they're working on training employees, then it is a different purpose. And so have clarity around what it is that they're doing as leaders or as a team. And we try not to pair these together in the same method to confuse people with what it is we're attempting to achieve through the method. So I'll give an example. An employee forum event where the CEO is in front of the entire organization and its workforce and keeping them up to date and in the know about what's been happening in the organization, what's planned to be happening in the organization, how the organization is doing towards its achieving its goals, etc. So really keeping them up to date and in the know. If we incorporated a training element in that, people may be confused about the fact that they are supposed to do something and follow up to an employee forum when the main purpose of it truly is communication for the purpose of keeping people up to date and in the know. If we put them in the same event, communication and training, we may confuse our audience as to what they're supposed to do with what they're hearing. So we like to keep these two things pure and separated as much as possible. But then as an organization really brands and creates this understanding about the difference of communication and training. And for instance, in leadership trainings, we help our partners be able to develop internal ongoing education for leaders. There's this process. As part of that process, there are these anchor events that are quarterly leadership trainings for leaders. And at those quarterly events of training that are day long, there could be an element of communication there folded in there, but we don't really recommend that until the organization gets pretty mature in their branded communication and in their branded training. And then if they fold a little bit of communication into a day-long training event, you're not confusing your audience because they're very clear. And also, when you engage or lead that part of the event, and it's a training event, and you want to use a component of that time together for some communication, you're just very clear about it. Okay, guys, this is not training where learn, do. this component of our time together is communication. We're just very clear on that. I know this sounds like such semantics, right? Like, really does this make a difference, Sue? But I can tell you, we've worked with dozens of healthcare organizations. We've worked with thousands of leaders and hundreds of different employee-driven teams. And we're working with them on the purpose of wide scale, multifaceted improvement and transformation and growth, which does require a lot of communication and a lot of training. And we've learned that it matters. So we're always evaluating the tactics that they're using, the approaches that are working, those that are having the best impact. And so when we're working with our partner healthcare organizations, it's like a 26, 27-month process that gets us doing all of this work, putting all these leadership practices in place with all of their leaders, creating these high functioning, high contributing, employee driven teams that are aligned with top strategic priorities. So right from the very start, we're baking this right in. Like, I was just with a brand new employee training and communication team 2 weeks ago. And in my very first time with them, we were talking about this very thing, right? So this is something that's so important that we lead with it. It's one of the things that we start with so that over time we brand these things are communication, these things are training. But then there's a couple other terms, one of which you're probably very familiar with. Most leaders are, which is meetings, right? So while meetings can be a forum for communication, they often become a mix mash of things where the agenda topics include things such as training, campaigning, and or goal project process improvement activities. And I just use that word campaigns or campaigning, and I'm going to talk about that more in just a minute because that's the fourth word that we need some clarity around when we're improving communication in an organization. But in our view, we truly love meetings to be focused on goal, project, and process improvement type activities. And as much as possible, we love to keep them pure in that way within an entire organization. And that's not the starting point in most organizations when we start working with them. Like, I'll just give the example of staff meetings. Many department leaders in healthcare organizations, me included in the 20 plus years when I was a healthcare leader, we would host monthly staff meetings. And again, they would be a potpourri of different things. And maybe the staff didn't know what to expect. It would be this one month and this another month, and we'd approach it this way, etc. And oftentimes, if anything, the most common thing and the most time spent at staff meetings by department leaders is typically using it as a forum for communication or keeping people up to date and in the know in their department. And so there's a lot of blah, blah, blah talking at people, which then leads to people not being really excited to show up to listening to blah, blah, blah when they could have read it. So that's actually an approach we definitely recommend in healthcare organizations, is that when leaders can have more timely, more effective methods for communication, a regular weekly and even daily cadence, or a paired daily and weekly cadence, a very specific communication that keeps employees up to date and in the know in real time, then we don't have to batch that for a monthly staff meeting. And then that frees up that meeting time at a monthly staff meeting to really focus on engaging employees in a dynamic process of time together focused on setting and achieving goals, making progress on projects and or process improvement initiatives. That's how we would love most meetings to be used, is to focus on, this is a team that has an improvement or project or goal aim, and we're working together, collaborating together to develop the action plan for that, go through the plan, do, study, adjust, or whatever the process is we're using, and do that together as a team. If we can have a great communication plan and a great training plan and methods for doing that that are very effective, then our meetings can shift in purpose and add value in new, powerful ways to our efforts to improve as an organization. And then there's a fourth term I've been using here and slipped it in a couple times already, and that's the word campaign. And this is something that definitely in our work of leading change and helping departments, organization wide efforts, and teams to help people learn to do things a new, better way, campaigning is a tactic that supports training. So it's separate from training, but it supports training. I mentioned that training is a process, not an event. So just like a formal in-person training event or a formal virtual training event is for the purpose of learn, do, campaigns can also be part of a development or learning process. And what campaigns are a tactic to keep the learning alive or top of mind in your audience, because training is not one and done. We don't train people once and expect that everyone is going to be competent and consistent in the new, better way right out of the gate. That is not how humans adopt change. Even though they've been trained, they're smart, they have the know-how, they've learned it, they've practiced it, they can do it. Humans are funny that way, right? We resist change. And so one way to support the learning process and the training process is in between trainings or in follow-up to trainings, we can campaign for the lessons learned and to bring out reminders and tips and tricks that support the learning and keep inspiring and equipping and reminding our audience of the new, better way. We learned it, right? And now let's be reminded. Let's build on that. And we don't have to keep doing formal trainings to make that happen. We can use a tactic like campaigns. Now, what would a campaign look like? Well, it might be visual, such as like a flyer or a poster or a communication board where we have just this top of mind reminder. Hey guys, we learned this new, better way. Here's a reminder of one tip that will help you be successful. It could be virtually, such as, a short video. That's one of the things that we help teams with is we provide them with what we call done for you videos. So we have a whole collection of 25 or so videos that are 2 to 4 minutes, animated videos that leaders and or teams can use to keep certain learning alive. So while they may be doing training of employees or leaders in this way, they can use these short little video campaigns, 2 to 4 minutes. They could show it at a huddle or a staff meeting to really keep that learning alive. Or it could be verbally, just talking about it at huddles or forums or town hall meetings, like I mentioned. So we could fold those campaigns into meetings. We could fold them into other communications. So communication, training, campaigns, and meetings are 4 important elements of improving communication in an organization. And when we get clarity around the purpose of each of these and the impactfulness of each of these, and we have very specific methods and practices and a cadence of these. So for instance, communication could be a daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly, or a combination thereof for very specific communication purposes. Training could be monthly or quarterly or semi-annually, whatever that cadence is. But it's great to have a branded, consistent method and cadence for that. And then campaigns, for instance, patient experience teams that we work with, they do a lot of training on improving the patient experience, service quality, those kind of things. But they use campaigns very effectively. And so they might have semi-annual training, but every month they have a monthly campaign that keeps that learning alive in the hearts and minds of the workforce. So they have this very specific cadence, and they even brand the method and maybe even name that method. And then also meetings, right? So a lot of meetings have a standing cadence to the meeting. This is a biweekly meeting. This is a monthly meeting. This is a quarterly meeting. But then let's get very clear on what is our purpose of how we're going to use that meeting time. And as I mentioned, if we can get really great at communication, training, and campaigning outside of meetings, Meetings can be purely used for improvement activities. Teams gathered together around a goal, a project, or a process improvement. So there we go. I am quite certain that there is at least one gem in today's podcast that you can just start. I'm not sure what it is for you and where you're at in your leadership or where you're at in your organization's effort to improve communication and be on that journey from good to great, great to even greater, which does require improved communication. And in our view and our experience, that involves communication, training, campaigning, and meetings. All are important parts, all are important tactics, and can make a positive impact. And what we see time and time again, especially when we're doing our baseline early on assessments of healthcare organizations, where we're determining their action plans for the first year of their transformation initiative, we pretty much 100% of the time find that improving communication comes out as a top priority out of employee surveys, out of leadership focus groups. And we know it's a key to a great culture. We know it's a key to leading change. And so consider for yourself today, where do we need to just start? If you want a little more information on the topic of improving communication, you might want to go back and listen to episode 12, which is titled Shift from Chaotic to Consistent Communication. You'll probably find a gem or two in that episode as well. And also something new at Capstone Leadership Solutions is that in 2025, we began sending out a printed newsletter to 2,500 CEOs of healthcare organizations with 80 or less beds. So we're not hitting every hospital CEO in the United States, but 2,500 of them every single month with a complimentary newsletter that we call the Capstone Chronicle. And it is meant to be a very short, practical resource for healthcare executive teams and leaders. And so we sent our first episode out in January and a second one out in February. But if you happen to be someone that wouldn't be receiving that newsletter, the Capstone Chronicle, and you want a copy of it, it is on our website, capstoneleadership.net. And you can find that under the resource page. And also another way to just receive those in your inbox is to join our newsletter list. So for many years, we've had a weekly newsletter on Tuesdays that go out via our email list, our newsletter email list. And so if you sign up for our email list, you'll actually get in your inbox a Tuesday short digital newsletter. On Wednesday, you'll receive the latest episode of Culture Change RX. And then once a month, you'll also receive the PDF of the new Capstone Chronicle newsletter. And page 3 of that is always, always, always something that would be a great thing to bring to your executive team meetings and facilitate a discussion around that page 3 resource every single month. So I'll put those links in the show notes to make it easy for you to find your way there. And I'll also put the link to episode 12 in the show notes. Tune in next Wednesday for another episode of Culture Change RX.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.